here we are at, I believe it's episode 25 now, and it's me, Chucky, from the forums, and we've got Jigsaw.
It's your boy Jaggy. What's up?
Uh, okay. Well, as usual, we've got a bunch of movies to discuss. What have we got for today's show?
Yeah, as always, we have a somewhat eclectic lineup, which is just what we like going for. First up, we have from 2009, Sorority Row. Then, movie from earlier this year, Ma. Following that, from 1976, we have Grizzly, which is a bit of a jazz ripoff. Then, another movie from this year, which is probably a lot more memorable than Ma was, we have Midsummer. And then we will finish up with From 2010 Buried, which is the movie with Ryan Reynolds.
You're a bitch!
First up is Sorority Row. Pretty simple slasher movie here. Group of sorority sisters who play a prank on one guy, which results in the death of one of their sorority sisters. They try to cover up the death after the prank goes wrong, and got a bit of a I know what you did last summer type of situation where, you know, someone's now stalking these sorority sisters, and we've got to figure out, is the killer somehow connected to that, or is it just something random? I don't know. Let's. The movie's, it's pretty much your typical teen slasher, I guess. Yeah, I mean, I saw this one in theaters when it came out. It is, I believe it's a remake of The House on Sorority Row.
Yeah, it's from my understanding, it's based on the screenplay. There were some changes made, and
Yeah.
It feels a lot more like, like you said, I Know What You Did Last Summer than The House on Sorority Row.
Yeah. I have seen The House on Sorority Row, but I believe there was a bit of a different plot in there, like someone drowned in a pool or something like that. And yeah. So this one, yeah, it's a bit different. It's okay. It's I think one of my main issues with this movie and a lot of kind of teen horrors as time goes by is that I don't know if you can consider these people teens, but because they're in college, so some of them may be in their early 20s, I don't know, but it's just, it's full of Chads and Stacys, the guys with the chiseled abs and the bitchy, skinny, wannabe model type girls, they're just all bitchy and
they're proud of it too.
Yeah, it almost feels like there's no real people in the movie. Like, I don't know, they're just... Whoever directed this, I don't even recall, but it almost feels like they're making a movie based on how they think teens are, as opposed to how they really are, or young people, let's call it.
Well, I'll say I did know some people in college that didn't seem too far off from some of these characters.
Yeah, I'm sure you can come across a couple, but in my experience, they're not. Pretty much a whole movie's full of them.
Yep.
And usually, in my experience, it's the other way around. But yeah, there's a couple of decent deaths in the movie. As a slasher movie, it's okay. I didn't have any major issues with the movie, but at the same time, I didn't love it either.
Yeah, so I hated the first 20 minutes of this. And it's just sort of like what you say, just bitchy sorority chicks, and they play this prank, and of course, oh my god, we have to save ourselves. That's what she would want. I just hated all of these characters. Like even the quote unquote gold ones, like I think her name was Ali. Even she was like, oh, well, I have a scholarship. I can't give that up. It just I hated all of these characters. And then when the killing starts to get like a little engaging, but then for the last, I don't know, 35, 40 minutes, I went back to hating it. Because it's as far as slashes go, it's fine, but it's just so generic. And it doesn't help that one of the main chicks, the really bitchy one, just keeps making these I don't know if they're necessarily meant to be jokes, if she just got shut up, but I mean, she's not taking the situation seriously whatsoever, and it just there's a few things in this movie that bug me, including the ending, which I'll touch on, I'll try to touch on without spoiling, but just overall, this movie just felt extraordinarily vapid, and I honestly don't see how this has above a 5 on IMDb, and I know it's just barely above a 5, but I didn't see it. I just don't see it.
Well, it sounds like you didn't enjoy it. Well, you disliked it more than I did, so.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely, it's not like it's the worst movie of 2009. It's just there's so many other slashers that came out like in the late 2000s that, if not necessarily amazing, they're decent, they're a little, more original. But this one just, I mean, what does this have? What does this give us that any other slasher doesn't?
Mm. I mean, there's a couple things in the movie that I guess I could point out. Like, one thing that kind of bugged me, and maybe this is maybe you're too young for this to be something that popped in your head, but there's this one character who looks exactly like, or at least to me, looked exactly like the actress who plays Winnie Cooper in The Wonder Years. I had to look her up just to make sure it's not the same person. I didn't think it was, because the actress would have been quite older than she would have been in the mid-30s if it was her, so it didn't really seem to match up age-wise, but it looked exactly like her from my point of view. So I'm guessing you never saw The Wonder Years when you were younger.
I never have.
No.
I'm deeply apologetic.
Yeah. Aside from that, I mean, well, Carrie Fisher is in it. I'm sure Star Wars nerds would beat off over that, but
I don't think she really added that much to the movie.
no, she's got like 2 scenes, and I mean, there's one scene where she obviously has a confrontation with the killer, but
yeah, I think the main thing she was here is just to be a red herring.
yeah, I mean, I personally couldn't give 2 shits about Star Wars, so I don't know how you feel about that series, but so her presence in the movie didn't really do anything for me either. But I think she was, more of a big name to put in the movie, and I don't know, just draw some attention to it.
Yeah, a big issue I had with this, so without going into any spoilers, when we find out the identity of the individual behind the killings, it struck me as, much like the rest of the movie, just very superficial. Like, I sort of liked why the individual was killing these people, but then instead of being somewhat like just a sympathetic, I thought I had to do this, like this individual is like completely psychotic, like completely crazy, completely over the edge, and it just felt like he went from like 0 to 50 over the course of like 3 minutes. Like it didn't feel real to me. I was pretty unsatisfied with how they decided to conclude this, and it didn't help that much of the movie beforehand wasn't necessarily great to begin with, but the ending and then like the small scene at the end, like the 18 months later, like, again, like utterly pointless. Like it just bothered me so much, and that scene when the survivors are walking out of the house and a hideous song is playing, and they're like slow motion walk out of the house with the fire behind. I just hated it so much. It felt so Hollywood. It felt so glossy, and it's just not what I want from a slasher movie.
My biggest problem was the chick that said, or she said, if you wanted to see perfect tits, you just had to ask or whatever, and there was nothing perfect about those tattoos.
Yeah, I was just thinking to myself, I wonder if Chucky's biggest problem is there wasn't enough nudity. They certainly could have opted a bit.
Yeah. Well, that is true, because pretty much all the girls in this movie, they're all really skinny, and, I prefer more of a full-figured woman, curvy and stuff.
I'm sorry, but those women can't be in sororities.
Well, they can be in They can, they can go to my college any day.
Speaking of which, that one guy, hey, just flash a bit and then I'll let you into the party. That guy wasn't a dig at all.
Yeah, it was kind of amusing, but at the same time, douchebag. I guess the only other thing that I'd mention is towards the end when we do find out who the killer is, or kind of just before we find out, there's a line in the movie where this one guy is saying something like, "Your boyfriend's not here to protect you," yada yada yada. I knew exactly what the response was going to be at that stage. I actually said the response before the guy said the response, and I mean, I last saw this movie like 10 years ago, so it's kind of amusing that I could just guess the dialogue.
Yeah, it's just because this movie's just so like cookie cutter by the numbers Hollywood. Like I feel like there's really not much surprising in this movie. Like if you're surprised, the most surprising thing to me is how awkward the whole. I mean, it felt awkward to me. The whole one of the characters has like a senator for a father, so like he's concerned about the image of a sorority chick dating his son. It just the whole thing just sort of felt awkward to me, and it just the whole movie. It's just not my thing. I have to admit this. No, I went into this one, and I've only seen this one time. I watched it. I finished it about 40 minutes ago, and I really wasn't expecting much. I was I tried to go in with an open mind, but once like the opening scene started and showing that like uber cool party, and I was done. Though I am happy that you enjoyed it more than I did.
Enjoy is a strong word, but yeah, I thought it was okay. Yeah, I remember when I first saw this in the theaters, and immediately, as soon as the opening credits started, they're having that party inside the sorority house. I remember my wife at the time was saying something like, I don't remember her exact words, but she was basically saying, like, do people really have parties that, spectacular? It kind of seems like everything's just played up too much. Yeah, so, Sorority Row has... I think it's got some decent kills in the movie. I mean, certainly nothing all that memorable, but there's a few decent kills in it. The story is pretty generic. It's pretty typical of, a teen or young adult type college slasher movie. It didn't really do anything much for me story-wise, and a lot of the characters, you just don't really care for them just because they're all so bitchy, and yeah, they're all so unlikable in their own different ways, for the most part. Even, I mean, okay, maybe one or two of the girls you'd say were okay just because they didn't really do anything too bad, but there's no one really to root for all that much, in my opinion.
Well, the killer, but
yeah. Well, even once you find out who it is, you kind of think they're an idiot as well. Yeah. So yeah, 6 out of 10 for me. I think 6 out of 10's fair.
Yeah. So, like I said, it's not like this is the worst horror movie from 2009. I just found it generally unremarkable and definitely unmemorable. I thought there was like maybe one or two okay kills, but overall, if you were to watch like a one of these types of revenge slasher movies, just stick with I Know What You Did Last Summer. Like that movie blows this out of the water. It's not even close. Like this has very little going for it, and like I said, I'm amazed that even though it has mediocre reception, it's still as high as a mediocre reception as it is. I'm giving this one. I'm just going to give this a 5 out of 10. There's not much going for this, and I just couldn't see myself watching this again willingly.
I guess, this is whether or not you want to attribute it to the end of slasher movies for the decade, but, we were getting remakes of, obviously, this and then Prom Night.
Oh, God. some true classics.
Neither of them were all that good, so slasher movies kind of fell off the radar somewhere around this point.
The 3D My Bloody Valentine also came out. Very hard 2009.
Yeah, they're all like late 2000s slasher movies, and then the next decade was just all about supernatural ghosts and demons, that type of thing.
Which in a way makes sense, because if they're just going to focus on slasher movies but just focus on remakes, just why bother?
It's not even that the 2000s were, full of slashers. I mean, there were quite a lot of slashers, but it certainly wasn't like the dominant subgenre of horror of that decade, in my opinion, either. So, in fact, I can't even recall what the dominant subgenre was.
I think it's all over the place, to be honest. I don't know if there was past a certain point, there was zombies.
Yeah. Anyways, we can move on.
Are you going?
Next up, we have Ma from 2019, in which this Octavia Spencer's character, who most people know from, I think, The Help, which is some like drama movie, maybe, I don't know, but she plays this lonely woman who befriends a bunch of teenagers, and she gives them a place to party in her basement, and they think, hey, it's a safe place to go and drink and have fun, and they go, and eventually they start getting sort of strange vibes from the woman. And they, decide to try to get out of, going to the basement, but then she becomes somewhat obsessive, like, hey, you guys got to come over, and then we learn more about the backstory of Ma and how dangerous she really is. When the trailer for this one first dropped, before it came out, I watched the trailer and I got sort of, I wouldn't necessarily say excited, but I was interested. Like, I thought, hey, they could do something pretty unique with this story. And then flash forward to just, I think, a week and a half ago, and I finally see it. And I have to admit, I was quite underwhelmed with this one. It's not like the movie was necessarily bad, but I feel like they could have done so much more. Aside from like a few okay actors and actresses, this one doesn't strike me as one that even in like a few years people are going to be talking about. I mean, even after it came out, I pretty much didn't hear anything about it. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I remember seeing the trailer for this one a couple of times when I was watching some other movies at the theaters, and it looked okay. It wasn't something that, I was going to rush out and see at the cinema, but I thought, I'll give this a look at some point. And I had the tough decision this week of, okay, because I selected the movie, I wanted to select something that was fairly new. Obviously, we got Midsommar later on to discuss, which is also fairly new, but, I thought I'd try and get this one out of the way. So I had the tough decision, do I pay $6 to rent it, or do I just go ahead and buy the Blu-ray for $15 or whatever it is? And I've got this struggle now. Okay, well, I can spend $6 and then lose that $6, or if I buy the Blu-ray, at least I've got the movie forever and I can watch it again, and technically it's like paying an extra $9 or whatever on top of the rental to keep it. I'm actually kind of glad that I only rented it.
I was wondering where this story was going. Like, did you actually buy it?
I was just building up some suspense. Yeah, I don't see myself wanting to watch this again. I thought it was pretty underwhelming. Story was somewhat interesting. Well, not even interesting, but there are ways they could have gone about it. It actually reminds me of a movie that has some similarities to it, which was also in theaters earlier this year called, there was a movie called Greta. Technically it's from 2018 because it got played at some film festival in 2018, but it actually only got released in 2019 in theaters worldwide. And that's a similar movie about, an older lady who kind of attaches herself to, well, in that instance, it was just one girl, or at least a couple of girls, but this one, it's like a whole group of people, and there's obviously something off about the woman. And I thought Greta was a little bit better than this one. I actually don't mind Octavia Spencer. I've seen her in some other things, and I think she's a decent actress, so it's not really anything to do with her.
I thought she did the best, probably is what she was given, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, we just talked about Sorority Row and how I kind of hate the way younger people party these days. It's just so obnoxious, and so some of the teens in this movie, they also annoyed me as well. I don't know, maybe I'm just getting old and grumpy and...
Yeah, to be honest, I thought most of these characters were not necessarily great characters, but I thought they were bearable. No, I didn't hate, too many of them. They're just your typical teens, and I personally actually really liked Maggie, the main character. I thought she was somewhat of an engaging character. I just wish they went a different story with her.
Yeah, I just didn't feel like the movie went a lot of places all that quickly, and then, I'm watching all these kids, all these obnoxious kids partying and doing all these things. They're just kind of annoying me, and of course things happen later on, but and especially towards the end, a lot of stuff happens, but by that point I was already kind of done with the movie. I was like, okay, this isn't doing anything for me. So I didn't really particularly like how the movie was written. I thought the ending, even though there was some entertaining parts to the ending, the way it ends also felt a bit stupid to me. I certainly wouldn't have ended it the way they did. Having the sick daughter character didn't really do anything for me either.
Yeah, that was such a, in my opinion, sort of strange. She appears, I don't know why she was even allowed to go to school for the first day. Like, she's there for a single scene and then she disappears and then she comes. It just felt awkward to me.
She's literally there just to establish her presence for later in the movie.
Yeah, I didn't care for it, and also the whole extended flashback. We get bits and pieces, of Ma's backstory, and like, I mean, I felt bad for her, but I don't know if that's enough to become what she is now. Yeah, I'll say I did like the beginning of the movie. I liked the relationship between the Maggie's character and her mother. I did like that relationship, and I do think Diana Servos, who played Maggie, was pretty decent in the movie. And toward the end, there's a bit of a not necessarily torture aspect, but there's some a little more violence thrown in, and I did like some of that stuff. Maybe just because something was finally happening that was worth watching, but otherwise, I just think this is a movie that is really going to stand out much. I was pretty disappointed with this one, and I'm going to give this one a 6, and I had to think about this for a bit. So it's totally below average rating for me, but I do like a few of the characters, and even though the story I think is decently poorly written, it did have potential, but it's definitely not a movie I could see myself wanting to really watch again.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw it a 4 out of 10. I don't envision myself wanting to see this again. I just didn't really care for any of the characters. The story had potential, but I don't think it really used it all that well. The most joy I got out of the movie is noticing that there was one woman in the movie, the one who kind of played the... she's a bit of a hoe. The one that's in the casino stealing the drinks or whatever. Just noticing that woman played a pretty ridiculous character in that dodgeball movie. I think her character's name was something like Francesca Stalanuskovic Davidovich Ski or some bullshit. And she's got like these massive eyebrows. I don't know, she plays this really ugly Russian chick in the movie, which is kind of funny because apparently she's a somewhat attractive woman to most people. So anyways, that was the real only enjoyment that I got out of the movie, kind of seeing her and making that connection to that ridiculous character.
Well, at least you got something.
Let's go on to Grizzly from 1976. Pretty simple plot, because it's essentially a Jaws ripoff. There's this huge grizzly bear out there killing people, and essentially it's up to a park ranger to find it and kill it. That's more or less what it is. So yeah, I think we've mentioned how it's a bit of a Jaws ripoff. I think Jaws came out a year or two before this one, if my memory serves correctly.
It was just a year. It came out 75.
And you can draw parallels between some of the characters as well. Like, obviously, this is a bear instead of a shark, but you've also got, like, the park ranger is kind of similar to Brody from Jaws, and then you've kind of got, like, that mayor-type character. There's a similar one in this, and I think there's multiple characters where you can say whether you want to call them carbon copies or just coincidences, I don't know, but they're there. Now, I think this movie's still okay. It's not like a terrible ripoff. Even though I'm not a huge Jaws fan, I think Jaws is a decent movie. I think this movie's not as good as Jaws. I'm sure most people will agree with that. The movie was surprisingly gory, I thought. Like, you see quite a lot of limbs flying, some blood. So the deaths in the movie are decent. The only thing about the deaths is that I wish there was more shots of seeing the actual bear in the shot rather than someone wearing like a bear paw or something, taking swipes at people. I know it's tough to get a real life bear, in a shot attacking someone, but I kind of felt like that's what the movie needed to really get it over the line for me, and it didn't really have that. The characters are a bit dull to me. Like I said, they're kind of like weaker clones of characters from Jaws. So, while I didn't have any major issues with any of the characters, none of them were all that memorable to me.
Yeah, I'll say the only character that really made an impression on me. I don't even remember the guy's name, to be honest. He was the guy who sort of hung around the forest ranger most of the movie. Sort of a taller guy with a really southern accent. And I sort of like that guy. He was sort of like the a typical, like, I guess you could say country hick type guy, as opposed to like the more scientific. I think his name was Scott. So he was sort of fun, but otherwise, I don't know if there's a whole lot of interesting characters here. And plus, a woman just sort of disappears past a certain point too. Like, that seems so awkward.
Yeah. I mean, it does have a bit of a surprising death scene when you see the child that gets mauled by the bear, which is probably the most standout scene for me.
Yeah, so I've seen this one once before. I'll just say 5 to 18 years back, sometime before, and that's pretty much the only scene I remembered. And so watching this one again, it really is the only scene, I guess, aside from maybe the ending, the way they get rid of the bear. I guess that's somewhat memorable. It's not, it's not great, but the idea is okay.
And the funny thing is, they kind of kill it the same way they kill Jaws. I mean,
Yeah.
like in terms of explosion type deaths, yeah.
Yeah, and really the scene with the kid is pretty much one of the only really great scenes in the movie, in my opinion. I don't even necessarily think it's great, but you don't really see all that often violence against kids in horror movies, which I think is really disappointing on a side note. But I just wish, there'd be a bit more open to violence against, more people, which might sound like a strange thing to say.
Jigsaw's a big fan of a Serbian film.
I actually have never seen that. Maybe that can be next week. But
It's alright. I was just making a very poor joke.
yeah, but so that's like the one scene maybe worth watching. Otherwise, I mean, it's a 70s movie. It sometimes feels. I mean, I think the scenery is beautiful. It was, I think, filmed in Georgia. I mean, it looks really nice, but it's just sort of a dry movie in my opinion. And there's not a. I mean, there's occasional bear attacks, but there's a bear attack, and then they go back to like a talking for like 15 minutes, and then another bear attack. Aside from like maybe the forest tower scene, I didn't really feel like there's a whole lot of suspense here.
Mm.
Well, I say the poster is sort of nice. I do like the poster. So, and apparently this was one of the highest God, what was it? It made a lot more money than it was expected, and it's sort of like a cult behind this one who really enjoy it. So I mean, it's definitely interesting. It's probably one of the better bear horror movies. I mean, I can't think of like a whole lot, but there's others out there. No, and it has some like 70s charm to it, but after seeing it again, I can sort of remember why I forgot most of it.
I'm sure my dad would like this movie. He likes a lot of when nature attacks type movies. Like, obviously he loves Jaws, so he'd love seeing a huge grizzly bear killing people as well. Like, you could throw really any kind of animal out there. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be spiders, snakes, bears. Doesn't matter what it is. Foxes. Just any kind of wild animal out there killing someone, and he'll probably find it interesting.
You know, now that you mention it, I cannot think of a Killer Fox movie.
Yeah, so I thought this was an okay movie. Not as good as Jaws, obviously, but yeah, I think when you said it's a bit of a dry movie, that probably is quite fitting. And I think all over, from the characters to the story to the death scenes, just in comparison to a bigger movie like Jaws, they're just a little less exciting. So I give the movie a 6 out of 10. I had an okay time with it. I don't know if I'd bother to watch it again, but I'm certainly open to revisiting it maybe 10, 20 years later.
To be honest, there's not really, in my opinion, much to say about this. It does the job. It set out to do okay, and it's okay. It's just not overly exciting. Well, there were a few decent scenes. I do think the scene with the kid and like the one of the bears attacking the forest tower. Both of those are decent scenes, but it's just not a very memorable movie in my opinion. So I'm also going to give this one a 6 out of 10.
I've probably mentioned Jaws like a million times already, but I guess if someone's looking for like some sort of recommendation for this movie, I would say that unless you've got this fascination for grizzly bears over sharks, that's the only thing that's really going to really elevate this one over Jaws.
Or maybe if you like cheese, there's a lot of cheese in this movie. So next up we have Midsommar, which came out earlier this year, in which a somewhat dysfunctional couple travel with some friends to a sort of a midsummer festival. It's just a sort of small community, and there's like a 9-day festival, and things begin happening. Some potentially violent, potentially bizarre things go on. Yeah, this is by the same director of Hereditary, Ari Aster. His second movie, a second full-length movie, and you can definitely feel the same type of, I don't know, maybe ominous overtones. It definitely feels like one of his movies. I'll just say this up front. I enjoyed this quite a bit more than Hereditary, which isn't necessarily the common perception, but I think it's very interesting. I don't think it's anywhere near perfect, but I do think it's a really interesting movie, very ominous movie, and depending on which version you watch, I guess it doesn't matter. Either version, it's a very long movie. So, what did you think about this one, Chucky?
Yeah, so I saw this one in the theaters, and then I also just finished watching the director's cut on Blu-ray. My overall opinion on the movie didn't really change at all. I think it's a decent movie. I think it's a movie that people should watch just because of how different it is to most other films. It is something more that you probably should. It's more of an experience, I guess you could say. I mean, it's a 3-hour movie. I guess the one thing about it is that most horror movies, they tend to take place at night time, whereas this one's mostly in the daytime. So it's almost contradictory of what horror movies in general look like. There's a lot of interesting things that happen in the movie. There's some characters that you just want to punch them in the face, but
I'm assuming I know exactly what character you're talking about.
Okay, well, which one?
I'm assuming you're talking about Maug.
Is that the one played by Will Paul Blart?
Yes. Yes.
Actually, no.
Oh, my mistake.
I think I'm trying to think of the best word to describe him. But I'm talking about Christian, the main,
I
the
don't
main
blame
guy.
you. That's another good choice.
Yeah, he is kind of a piece of shit, really. I mean, he spends this whole movie kind of playing emotional games with, his girlfriend, and who's obviously gone through quite a bit, as we see earlier in the movie.
That opening, by the way, is just heart-wrenching.
Yeah, so he's been thinking about breaking up with her for ages, and not only does he continue his relationship out of guilt, he invites her to this, and and throughout the movie kind of makes her feel bad in a lot of situations. Like, he forgets her birthday, and or even though I don't think that's the biggest of deals, but that's just one example. Then he essentially steals his friend's thesis, and he just does all these things that by the time you get to the end, you kind of don't really care too much for him. He's by that point, he's kind of established himself as being a piece of shit, in my opinion.
You actually remind me of something I wanted to bring up. I really think the main character, what was her name? Donnie, played by Florence Pugh. I'm not sure how you pronounce it last name.
It's probably pronounced Pugh, but
Pugh,
I'm
okay.
going to say Pooh.
I think she did a fantastic job in this movie. But the African American character, the William Jackson Harper, that's the guy who played him. I thought he was probably the most interesting because he knew some of, he knew a little bit before going in. Like, when they're talking about that one ritual they're going to do. It's like, wait, are you talking about like a real one of these? And it's like, and you could watch his facial expression when he's watching. He knows what's going to happen. And he's like, he sort of can't believe it. And I personally, I really like Danny as the main character. I sort of wish we spent some more time with him. I thought he was really interesting. Though it's sort of a dick move, one of the last things he does. But
Yeah, no, I thought his character was fine. Will Poulter's character, he I didn't mind his character either. I thought he had some amusing moments, like when he's having that trip at the start and telling everyone to lie down, and I don't like that the sun's out at 9 p.m. and there's some amusing things there. And I also think later on, kind of just before we do see that ritual with the old people, as we know what happens. Kind of just before that at the dinner, he makes a comment about how would that old guy sound if I put my finger in his butthole or something, and it's pretty immature, but at the same time, I heard that and I'm like, well, he's just saying what we're all thinking, isn't he?
actually, I wasn't thinking, but yeah. He definitely brought a little more, you could, I guess, lightheartedness to the movie. I mean, without him, this would be a very, I mean, it's already a somewhat bleak movie, but without him, it would be a lot worse.
Yeah, and speaking of characters, there was just the other one, the guy that kind of brings him in. What's his name? Pele? Or...
Yeah, Pele, I think.
Yeah, sounds like that soccer guy. Anyways. Something about his character made me want to slap the shit out of him too.
I sort of like the guy, to be honest.
You could kind of tell just by, I could tell that there was something a bit off about him, and
hey, he was one of the only nice, people to Donnie. So hey, give him some credit.
He comes across as like this really super nice guy, but yeah, I could kind of feel that there was just something else about him that was, probably not so nice. Well, in his mind throughout the whole movie, he's probably still being nice, but he had some ulterior intentions, I guess you could say. I don't know, there's something about looking at this guy that it's kind of similar to when you look at a guy and you just know they're a pedophile, or they just have this look like there's something not right about this guy. And I had that same sort of feeling about him whenever I saw him on the screen.
I almost feel so bad for liking him now, but I'll stick with it. I feel like I knew a guy somewhat like that back in college. He was from Iceland, not Sweden, but he had very similar personality. And I don't know, I sort of felt a kinship with him, but that's just me.
Mm. And you know they're doing when they're having the meals in the movie, and there was that whole thing about only sitting once it feels right to sit, and all I can think about is like, well, as soon as the food's there, or as soon as I'm at the table, that's when it feels right to sit. I don't want to stand all day. God damn.
Yeah, I really liked the layout of the table, sort of in a runic symbol type thing. It's very extravagant, but it also had the sort of. I mean, what I liked about the whole area was a somewhat simplicity to it. It's not like a giant piece of land, but they do make a lot of use out of what they had, and this, like I said, this feels very ominous, especially toward the end.
The it's it's just kind of funny the things I think of in certain scenes in this movie, but like towards the end, there's the sex scene.
Ah, yeah, that's a beautiful scene.
Yes, it's a very beautiful scene, and I mean, at first, we see him disrobe and see all his bits, and my mind immediately thinks, okay, so when this guy auditioned for the movie, did they tell him there was a nude scene, or did Ari Aster just surprise him and be like, "Bam, get your fucking pants off now"?
I'm going to have to assume they told him.
Yeah. We'll assume that, but
it's the other women they surprised in that scene.
Yeah.
That's a somewhat awkward scene, by the way, but that's okay. It's a divot culture.
Yeah, I never saw one person take a shower in this movie, so I'm also thinking, how dirty is that guy's butt crack? Because they kind of zoom, well, not zoom in, but they kind of have some unflattering angles of the butt, and
well, I mean, it's not like it's an uncivilized. Well, I guess it depends on your definition of uncivilized, but I mean, they did have electricity, so it's not like they're completely backwards.
Did they? I can't remember.
I think it mentioned some in the movie. They had like hydro-powered something like.
They must have, because they also, in what was probably the most awkward thing in the movie, was when they said they were watching Austin Powers.
Yeah, that seems so out of place. Like those, like I just can't imagine the kids of that series watching that movie. It just struck me as strange.
Yeah, I mean, considering the way these people live, just seeing a movie like Austin Powers should be like, I guess that's a way of having another trip without taking any mind-altering substances.
Well, and also I sort of like the whole like life cycle type thing. I thought it was pretty interesting. Where you're in, I forget if it's like spring when you go out and go out to the world and see how things go on, and then you come back and become a man. So I thought it was very interesting.
Well, it was like blocks of 18 years. Yeah.
And then of course we see where that leads to. But I do think it's an interesting concept. Like that one line about hey, we throw them into all the people into nursing homes, and that probably seems barbaric to them. And I sort of get that.
I don't know what that old dude was thinking, those 72-year-olds, but that was such doing a pencil dive was probably a very poor choice.
Although it did lead to some pretty decent scenes. Also, the whole like I don't know, like maybe last 20 minutes, like once the whole like festival, the whole dancing thing starts, and I think we all know where that's leading to. I think we knew from the beginning that hey, it's just possible Dani might become the May Queen. But the other thing, then the whole sex ritual goes on, and it sort of, I don't know, was she Dani, was she dragged at the end, or was she just like so out of it? She just like
was at what part? Right, just before the credits.
Like when she was being covered by flowers and stuff. Was she like dragged, or was she just like emotionally detached by that point?
I don't think they really show, but I guess you just have to assume that she's kind of just going with it
Yeah.
all.
Yeah, after that breakdown, when the women are wailing with it, that's such a strange. But it's just sort of a strange ending. I like I liked when we finally got to see inside like the pyramid tumble type thing. And there was some pretty grisly discoveries toward the end of the movie. And I think it's done really well. The one thing I really like about this is it takes a while. I mean, it's a 2.5 hour movie, if not longer, depending on if you watch the director's cut or not. And you're going to see some things eventually that are going to stick with you. And I personally think the movie sticks to that promise.
Yeah, it is a long movie. I mean, before anything really happens to anyone who's visiting the anyone who's an outsider, we're kind of waiting for things to happen to those people because we don't exactly know what's going to happen with them. But as the movie goes by, you kind of get the feeling, okay, there's no way they're going to let these people kind of leave and talk about this place. I mean, seriously.
I mean, the guy was writing a thesis on it, so...
Yeah, so eventually I think in your own mind, before anything even happens to them, you come to the conclusion, okay, especially when there was that whole controversy about the 2 other young people who supposedly got driven away, but it's very unclear, like their stories don't sound all that great. Like one guy left and they were coming back for the other one.
Yeah, I think they were really terrible lies.
Yeah, so obviously that seemed off, and you can kind of see what was coming for the other people. So in the director's cut, it's really at the 2-hour mark when you, and I think the first thing that when something really happens to these outsiders is when you see, I think it's a scene with Mark and Josh. Well, Mark gets taken away first, and then Josh thinks he sees Mark, and yada yada yada.
Yeah, I do like the whole thing with Mark being somewhat off-screen. Like we don't really know, at least I don't think we really know what happens to him.
Yeah, so that scene is literally like right around the 2-hour mark, in the director's cut. So, if you're someone out there who's really looking for a lot of quick, exciting things to happen, you're probably not going to find it here. The movie does move at a very slow pace.
But the atmosphere, though, makes it, in my opinion, pretty worthwhile.
Yeah, it does, as long as you can get at least somewhat invested in that. And I think I was somewhat invested in it. Because at the end of the day, I think it's a bit of a tug of war with this movie, because there's a lot of things to like, but there's also, being such a long movie, it's not like one of those movies you can just kind of pop in and have fun with.
Yeah.
You really have to be in a particular mood and have a lot of time spare just to watch it. And it's not like, I'm a huge fan of It, which is, whether you're talking about the 90s version or the newer version, if you combine them, it's just as long as this, if not longer. So, and I at least you can kind of watch those in 2 parts, where even though it's still one big story, whereas this one, you probably can't really watch it in 2 parts. You have to watch it in one go. Otherwise, what's the point? You could also argue that it is a bit pretentious as well. There's certain things in the movie that feel like, even if you just look at the credits, the credits annoyed me. They made the credits so fucking small. The title, I'm watching even when I saw it in the theater, I thought the title looks really small, and I'm watching on this huge screen. And then
does a small title equal pretenses?
I think it does, because how many other movies do that? It just feels like it's trying to be different just for the sake of being different. And if I'm struggling to read the title on a 55-inch TV, I think, what? Why make the title so goddamn small? Why?
I've got nothing.
Anyways, I know that's like a stupid thing to
I just think it's funny coming from a guy who, gives high praise to Only God Forgives, calling another movie pretentious, but
I'm more or less saying it because I think people can have that perception of the movie, and they can just completely write the movie off just for that.
to be honest, I actually think no, I think you liked Hereditary more than this one, right?
Slightly more, and it's probably because it's a little more digestible. Even though I wouldn't call it a conventional horror movie, it's certainly more conventional than this one is.
Yeah. So I agree with you on that point, but I would say the route that Hereditary took was probably a bit more out there than this one, in my opinion. I just no, I like I said, I like this one more than Hereditary. Not that I hated Hereditary, I just was expecting something else. But I guess the one thing you can say is that this director, if he keeps making horror movies, he's probably going to be one of the biggest names in the genre.
Well, he already is. So,
Him and Jordan Peele basically run the show right now.
yeah, just get him to do the next Batman movie or something. He'll be fine.
Well, I would say, how do you feel about the chick that is God, I can't remember the chick's name, but who feeds a guy her pubic hair?
Ah, Firecrotch. The redhead. Yeah. My only thought there is that I'm certain the carpet matches the drapes.
Yeah, that was that whole like conversation. I don't know if it was with the main woman of like the community, and it's like, hey, she has been approved to mate, and you have been approved to mate with her. Like, it's a bit of an awkward conversation.
Yeah, he's like, what does that mean? And I'm saying, well, it means you can fuck.
And to be honest, I mean, if any guy was going to do it, it's that guy right there. So
yeah, he's a piece of shit.
yeah, so I thought this was like Chucky said, it's very much an experience. Like, it's a very unique movie. It sometimes feels like maybe The Wicker Man, if you've seen that. This is another movie from, I think it was 2018, called Apostle, which dealt with like a cult type thing. And it goes a completely different direction, but it has some similar vibes to that. And this is a movie I'd very much recommend, and you may come out hating it. I know that this movie, like I said, isn't quite as well received as Hereditary, but I really enjoyed it. I'm throwing this one an 8 out of 10.
I think it's a decent movie. Like I said, it's a bit of a tug and war with me, and I think just a couple of things I struggle to, or that are kind of preventing me from giving maybe a higher rating, is just the length of the movie and how it's such a slow-paced movie. I still think it's good, but yeah, the slow pace just makes it very difficult to I don't know. It just I guess I'm just used to movies that move at a faster pace than that, and it's just so different. And when something is so different, it becomes more and more difficult to compare it to other movies and to really gauge exactly how much I enjoyed it. So I'm going to give it a 7, and I don't know, it could take years before I get to a point where like I know exactly what I think of this. I mean, I've seen it twice now, and even though my rating both times was kind of like a 7, I still feel I still don't know exactly how I feel about it.
Or maybe once Midsummer 2 comes out, but I don't know how you feel.
Midsummer 2, Christian's Revenge, yeah.
Sounds like a quality movie.
Yeah, make it happen. But this time 5 hours long, and with an even smaller title font.
Let me out of here, and I promise you I will get you the money.
You show blood.
Okay, well, let's move on to the final movie for today's show. Buried, from 2010, which is about an American truck driver who's working in Iraq, and he wakes up to find that he's been buried alive inside a coffin. And all he's got is these items that he had on him, which includes a lighter and a cell phone. And it's just essentially a race against time to escape. Now, I saw this movie originally in the theaters as well, and I had quite a good experience with that when I watched it in the theater. I mean, it's a movie about a person in a box, and that's it. I mean, you're not really seeing anything other than Ryan Reynolds in a box for 90 minutes or however long the movie goes for. So, I think to have made a full-length movie with those limitations is pretty incredible, I think. I mean, it's certainly not an easy thing to do. If anything, I mean, this is, to me, like the opposite of found footage movie. I think found footage is like the easiest thing you could do in a movie, and you know, complete opposite here. I think this is probably one of the most difficult things you can do in a movie. I mean, I don't love Ryan Reynolds, but I've kind of always enjoyed him, at least the movies he had done prior to this, so I didn't watch everything he was in, but, you know, I typically enjoy his performances, I guess you could say. So, depending on how much you like Ryan Reynolds, that may factor into how much you enjoy this movie, because it is him for 90 minutes straight. He's not trying to be as funny in this movie as he does in other movies, but there's still he still has that touch of comedy, I guess, that he's adding to one or two small scenes in the movie. Like that one scene where he's talking to, what was it, his wife's friend, and I can't remember what he called it, because I didn't watch this movie recently, but I've seen it plenty of times in the past, but he calls her a bitch or a cunt or something. I don't know what it was.
Yeah, that's so funny.
But I haven't watched this movie in years, actually, to be honest with you, but I have seen it multiple times, so I still remember pretty much everything that happens, just not word for word. But I do enjoy it. I think it's a good movie.
I was impressed with how suspenseful they were able to make this movie, but ultimately, I mean, I found the ending. Did the ending really surprise anyone? Like, was anybody watching this movie thinking the ending is going to be something significantly different? I just don't buy it.
Not necessarily, but I think it's
the joining that conclusion.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was trying to say. I think the journey there is. There's some pretty terrible moments throughout. Like there's that one. Well, they kind of build through the movie with this, but eventually gets to a point where, you know, his employer fires him over the phone, so his family loses all the benefits, and incredible piece of shit moment type thing.
That was the most American thing I've seen in my life, by the way.
Yeah, so that moment was pretty heavy, I thought.
Yeah, I think probably the most depressing scene, I guess, conversation, because it's out of the same scene, but when he was calling his mother, who has Alzheimer's, that was a fun scene. You know, and the ending was somewhat sad, and there's like a quote unquote hope spot with, you know, but it just, the movie was okay, just it didn't really blow me away, and it didn't surprise me. It was about as gorgeous as I thought it could have been, but it wasn't, anyway, in my opinion. It wasn't great. It's like an okay movie. That was definitely impressively made, given the limitations they went in with. But even so, I don't think it really was something I could see myself watching that many times, to be honest.
Okay.
Who was your favorite voice?
Jeez.
I like the generic terrorist guy, to be honest.
I don't know. Yeah, probably the terrorist guy. He's like, you give me 1 million money. You know, he's the one guy who I would quote after the movie.
I will say, when I went into this movie, I did think they're going to eventually, I thought they had to, you know, cut away from the box, you know, just to show something. I didn't know the whole movie was going to be inside the coffin. Which, you know, it's not like it's not like it deeply surprised me when they didn't. I was just somewhat, I was more impressed than anything. Like, hey, this is, I don't know if it's like a high budget movie, but they had Ryan Reynolds, so I'm assuming it was decently, well funded. Um, so I'm just sort of surprised it was so, I guess, unconventional in the way they did it. And it's probably to its benefit. It is, like I said, it's very, or it's obviously very claustrophobic, but it's pretty suspenseful too. I think the snake fight was a bit much, but I mean that's okay. Um, I just, like I said, I just let it blow me away. I'm sort of interested. Like, what's you said you saw this in theaters? What's the reaction in theaters to this?
Well, I watched it very late at night. It's like a 9 p.m. screening, I think, and I mean, we're going back almost 10 years, or
Yeah.
roughly 10 years, so I'm trying to... I think there was only, like, a small group of other people there, so... But they all seemed quite engaged. Like, no one left the theater, no one really made any noise from memory. I think, as far as I could tell, people were enjoying the movie. I was just looking at the budget of the movie, so it says it was about $3 million, and you have to assume a good portion of that probably went to Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah, but how much did the snake get?
Well, doesn't matter. The snake is gone. But it says the movie made $21.3 million at the box office. I don't know if that's just America or if that's worldwide.
Either way, that's impressive.
Either way, yeah, it made some decent money. And so it does say that the movie is based. Well, no, it is a true story.
Yeah, that's one thing. From an American perspective, just and this is related to the movie, but the whole thing with, hey, I'm not a soldier. I'm just working here. It's like, well, you're in our country, bringing, helping the army. It just, I saw, I felt bad for, oh, the Iraq and Afghanistan wars was such a mistake on the part of the U.S. It just, I get where these people are coming from. What did the guy say? Like, well, you say you wouldn't do this, but, maybe if your family was bombed and you were like dad kids, maybe you would. I thought it was pretty powerful, and I thought he had an okay point. That's my Jiggy's political comment for the night. It's gonna be a new segment.
I mean, I'm seeing other sites saying it was $2 million the budget.
Oh, it's $1 million. It's just a coffin and a snake. Like,
yeah. Well, we do hope that the snake did get, at least a few 100,000. I thought the movie was good, and especially considering the limitations of the obvious, it's just a person in a box for 90 minutes talking. That's really what it is. But I do think it has some decent suspenseful moments.
And plus a finger scene, which I love that.
Yeah. They find ways to make the 90-something minute runtime kind of go by without any big lulls. There's no real, you're not really spending 30 minutes here where nothing's happening. There's always something happening. Always.
There's a few quieter moments, but it's still pretty suspenseful throughout.
Yeah. So yeah, I thought it was pretty good. So I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10.
And I'm going to throw this one a 6, which is sort of, it's a below average rating. Like, I was impressed, but it's not a movie I could see myself watching that many times. It's well made for what it is, but I just wanted more from it. And yeah, that's all I have.
You must hate Ryan Reynolds.
Actually,
Ryan Reynolds hater.
I was looking through his movies. I've not seen that many Ryan Reynolds movies. I've never seen Deadpool or Deadpool 2. I've really only seen like maybe 3 movies with him. But he's a decent actor.
Yeah, probably my favorite Ryan Reynolds movie is Waiting, which is a comedy.
Yeah, I've not. Yeah, he was in. I just remembered he was in a small scene in a comedy movie called Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle. He was so funny there, and he was, I think, the main character in the Amityville Horror remake, which
Yeah.
he himself was a decent actor. I didn't care for the movie, but I mean he's been in other things that I enjoy. Not that many things, but he's definitely an actor who I recognize. So it was sort of nice seeing him in a box for an hour and a half. Bye, guys.
What is your favorite type of guy?
I would have to say Willem Dafoe.
Well, see, I'm just gonna swap those two audios around. So it's gonna say what's your favorite type of guy, and it's gonna have you saying bye, guys.
Okay. I'm okay with that. If you were to take the effort to do that, by all means.